What is up, bros? Me, Josh here, and welcome to episode 4 of Road to Tier 10, our series. We are going over every line in World of Warships to do a really in-depth analysis of the lowest tier all the way to the highest tier to see how they perform, the strengths and weaknesses, and everything about the entire line. And as you can see, we have finished Chapter 1 of this series. We have finished our first line, and we have the Tier 10 Pan-Asian DD. I just want to say, this series, to me, as somebody who's played just a ton of games, and on my main account, there just really isn't much for me to do anymore. This has really made World of Warships a lot of fun. This has been a lot of fun, and it's been actually very enlightening going through these lines again, because I've gone through so fast or used so many X flags, and it's kind of been a lot of fun to really go back through these lines and kind of get that good, first of all, just purely solo queue, and really just dive in to really see how this line performs just as a solo playing DD and just as a solo destroyer. And it was cool to finally get done with the first line of this series. So we finished it. It took us 180 games total. We'll dive in to the stats really fast. And this line had some surprising changes. And the nice thing is we're playing ranked battles right now. So first of all, how the display in orders of nation. Let's do it by tier. It's going to kind of mess it up a little bit. But this line, strengths and weaknesses, it still has stayed as being a very good line, in my opinion. Some of the downsides about this is we never really got a lot of the fully upgraded ships. As you can see, we just bought the Yu Yang, so I'm completely broke, and we had to sell a lot of the ones back down the line. But the obvious strengths and weaknesses of this is throughout the entire line, the line had really good detection. So very low detection, very competitive detection, and guns for guns, you were going to do very well against basically anything destroyer wise, especially in those close quarter combat. Good HE, good AP against DDs, and overall just really good. And being able to sneak up on let's say an IGN destroyer or something like that, rocking these really low detections was actually really nice. Found that to be strong throughout. Using the smoke, we started using that later into the line, using the smokes as being a more gunboat line, not just going out there and being a Russian destroyer line, but really using those multiple smokes that you get those more quantity over the length and quality. We're running radar right now because of that. But with the Pan-Asian DDs, what you do is you get a lot of smokes, but they're very short durations. So we started using that a lot more later into the line, the Gaja, the Hinsenyang, and the Chengmu. Now, of course, into the Yu Yang. I run smoke on the random builds, but that's one thing we started to do, and that was kind of a highlight of this line as well. Obvious downside of this line, especially right now, just so destroyer heavy, is the torpedoes. Now, these are extremely good against basically everything but destroyers. Obviously, they're deep water torps and they don't hit destroyers, but that was definitely a downside about this line, and it really was highlighted, especially now, because it's been like a 4 or 5 DD average game, it seems like, in randoms. So there are many situations where if I was in a German destroyer or IGN, anything that didn't have deep water torps, I definitely would have had a bigger impact. USN destroyers would have definitely, it's kind of the same almost play style, but you have those torps that can hit that. Definitely did notice that, especially get into like the tier 8s, 9s, and 10s, where killing a DD or getting that DD with a torp could have been potentially a game changer. So that was one thing. But overall, this line was so much fun. It was the first line in this series, and I wanted to pick a line that I really enjoyed. And this was actually really enlightening throughout this whole line to just see how there were actually a bit more maybe weaknesses to some playstyles, but how using the strengths really kind of highlighted. So things were super highlighted with playing just purely solo. And so the strengths of the smokes, the very quick smokes, getting in and out, pumping out lots of damages, forcing a fire, and then getting that flood, or forcing the flood and then burning them down with 2 fires because you have to use that smoke. That was awesome. But obviously the deep water torps were highlighted as being the weakness against the DDs. But man, when you were able to maybe clear out the destroyers on one flank, or maybe take one out and have a decent amount of life and help take out another DD, and then just go torp heavy, oh, the deep water torps are so good against everything else. They're so good. Snagging cruisers, knowing, like, having ships that have hydro, just throwing them out there, taking out dev striking cruisers. It's amazing. These things are so good. But definitely did notice it throughout. Not being able to hit DDs was kind of a bummer. So just going over recap, I don't have all of them, so we'll look at the tech tree. But going over all of these ships, the best ship for the line, the worst ship for the line, I have to give the worst to the Jinhua at tier 5. This ship, to me, I thought overall was a decent ship. The problem is the tier 5 matchmaking was terrible. We had 18 games it took us to get through this ship. 11 of them were bottom tier, and 8 of them were top tier. And so that it was just so brutal. Playing this ship was this is the one where I saw the growing pains the most, with its relatively high detection and not having a 10-point captain at that point. Just getting bottom tier. I didn't realize tier 5 matchmaking was this bad. It was by far the worst matchmaking, and we'll even talk about the Hinson Yang at tier 8. Tier 5 was by far the worst matchmaking I saw going through this first line. That's not saying it's going to be that for every line, but tier 5, it really amazed me how brutal that matchmaking was. And so not only being bottom tiered going against sevens, I mean, I had a decent skill to go against other destroyers, even if they had more life than you. I mean, you have a decent amount of life even with this ship and the upgraded hull and survivability expert. You had a good amount of health, but just getting so outspotted by everything that was at tier 7, you would just have such a disadvantage. And really got picked on by a lot of it. So I think the toughest ship online, maybe like the worst of the line, I would have to probably put on the Jinwei. It followed the Shenyang at 4, which was amazing. And I just think this one, the tier 5 with the mix of the matchmaking and the growing pains of not having the 10-point captain yet. And every line I'm going through, I'm starting with a 0-point captain at the lowest tier, and then working its way through. So if the line makes a lot of XP, it's going to get the faster one, the higher point captain quicker. So not having that concealment expert captain, this is the one I noticed the most growing pains. And this, even though we had a decent stats in this ship and we had a decent amount of XP in this, this was definitely one of the harder one and most surprising about just how rough tier 5 matchmaking. Obviously, the best ship in this entire line, tier for tier, I'm going tier for tier, the Gaja. Tier 7, the Gaja was so good. Low detection. Tier 7 matchmaking was insanely good. Nearly every one of our games throughout this entire ship we were top tier. Tier 7 matchmaking, it was by far the best. And, guess outside of like tier 10. But tier 7 was so good. It's such a fun ship. It's so strong for its tier, and it's definitely a keeper. If you haven't, this one was so much fun and just so good. You basically beat almost everything with your guns 1v1, and on top of that, your torps are still, even though 8 kilometers, they're still extremely good. And you can just be so effective with this ship, and just your guns are just so good. It's such a good ship. You can be aggressive DD hunter because of how the turrets work on this. You can just basically, and the back turret, you can almost get, since it's a 360, you can almost get about like right there, you can probably get all 3 of your turrets forward. So being very aggressive on a ship is really good. The downside is if you are pulling away from ships like this blocks it right here, so you only get these 2 turrets, which is kind of a bummer. But pushing into something was so good with this ship. Overall, though, I found like that this is the one ship that people tend to dislike, the Hinson Yang. What it basically is, it's basically a B hull, or I guess a C hull Henson. So it has 4 guns, deep water torps, and then people tend to kind of crap on this. I actually kind of enjoyed this ship. I thought it was fine. We only kept the 8-kilometer torps too throughout the entire thing to make the grind faster, and we never even upgraded the torps or the guns. And I did pretty well with this ship. We'll check out the stats for these as well. The Hinson Yang, if we get to it. We held a 62% win rate solo queuing, and I would say the probably bottom tier, top tier was right around 50%. I would say maybe even a little bit more towards being more towards the top tier. You get some of those games where it's tier 9, so it's kind of the in between, but I would say it was probably 50-50. I know tier 8 matchmaking for a lot of people is a big downside. People they seem to get bottom tiered all the time. I didn't really notice that. It was a good mix, it seemed like, and I felt like even with its detectability, you just were fine being bottom tier too. I think the tier 8 DDs tend to up tier pretty well. I think it's other cruisers and battleships that tend to have a bit of a hard time. But overall, I thought the Hinson Yang was fine. We didn't even have it fully upgraded. We got the hull, and that was basically it. We got through it in 34 games, which I thought was pretty good. And holding a 62% win rate with a 1.5 warship average kill, almost 50k, over 2,000 XP. This was, I thought over pretty solid. I thought a pretty solid destroyer in general, and actually had a lot of fun. So this was kind of another surprising too. People were like, "Oh, when I was playing it on stream, man, how's the Hinson Yang? How brutal is it? How brutal is it?" It really wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that bad. And we had some pretty monster games in it as well. The Chungmu took us a bit longer to get through than I thought. We hit some really tough stretches. Now this thing's insane, and one of the biggest things I really talked about with my chat when going through this is I never grabbed these upgraded torps. So I didn't know if the math was there to get it. So these were going to cost 20,000 XP, and then getting through, I just didn't know if I was going to make up enough to make these worth it. Oh, this is the Hinson Yang. So the Chungmu, I was to say, I think the 25k. So we stuck with the 9.2 kilometer torps with 55 knots, and these torps were 25k. So at that point, we were averaging, because we didn't have any extra camos, we were averaging about 3k a game, maybe 3 and some change, right there. So this would have taken us about an extra 8-9 games, and I just don't think it would have made up for it. Like, I don't think this would have sped up anything. But these torps are so much better. I kind of wish I could do a side-by-side with the Chungmu with these torps and without these torps, because these things are so good. So that was my biggest regret on going this, but I just don't think throughout the entire 60-some games we could have potentially made up that 25,000 XP. I think it would have ended up being a push, so I don't think it really would have mattered in the end. But who knows? Maybe there were some games that could have gone from a loss to a victory and would have kind of sped it up. I think throughout this entire process, though, we maybe could have cut out 10 to 15 games. Once we got to the Chungmu, our first like 5-6 games on the Chungmu were absolutely brutal. So whenever we were going through, that's when we were retraining our captain. We didn't have Concealment Expert. We didn't have Last Stand because we were retraining him. So I think our Chungmu grind got pretty halted in a lot of situations, and then a lot of the top tier teams were just so unwinnable. So although we still held a 60% win rate, and of course this ship is insanely strong, it was so good, and it just destroyed things. But holding a almost 57k damage, we averaged less XP than the Hinson Yang, but overall, it's so strong. The Chungmu's great. I think we could have probably got this around 55, but the start of our Chungmu took so long to get through to just get our captain retrained. It took so long because of just we ran into some like random torps, overextension, which was part of my fault. So that probably slowed this whole grind down, and overall probably made these stats a little bit worse than what they should have. But it's still an extremely strong ship. And then we got the Yu Yang, which we have a terrible win rate in right now, but we'll get there, don't worry. But this thing's insanely strong. We've been playing a bit more ranked. But overall, this was a awesome experience. 180 games total it took us to get from the tier 2 all the way to the Yu Yang. So not too bad. It took us about 2 weeks of time. And it was a lot of fun to actually get through there. So right now, obviously, I'm going to get some graphics throughout this series of kind of a leaderboard. But the again, strengths of this line: low detection, good smokes, good guns, and good torps against everything but destroyers. And that downside really is just you can't torp DDs, so you do feel a bit helpless in certain situations. And there are situations where I think if I was in another destroyer that could torp a DD, would have been a bit more effective. Overall, though, 180 games I think is extremely fast. I think this is going to be one of the fastest lines in the game. That's why I kind of picked it. I think it's going to be one of the fastest, but not the fastest. So we'll kind of wait. I won't tell you guys which ones I think would be the fastest, because I don't want to mess up the voting. But anyways, this is now, the next line is up to you guys. Which line do you guys want to see next? So the options are, we are using the entire USN line. We are using the entire USN line for another series. So we'll probably end up doing these on a third account at some point for this series, which will be lots of fun. But we are going to focus on this for another series. That's our beginner series. And then we're going to avoid doing CBs because the eventual rework, it just won't make much sense. So anything outside of USN and outside of CVs is fair game. If you want me to play a cruiser line next, you want me to play a different Russian destroyer line. So you guys leave a comment, which line do you want to see done next? So no USN ships and no CVs. Everything else is fair game. I will let you guys pick, and we'll start that as soon as we get kind of an overwhelming line that you guys want to hear. But anyways, hope you guys have enjoyed the series. It's been a really, really fun one. And it's been very eye-opening, not only with the Tier 5 matchmaking, but the Tier 8 matchmaking not being as bad as I thought it would, and then really getting through kind of the strengths and weaknesses of these ships, and kind of really seeing the highlights of the strengths and weaknesses of this Pan-Asian DD line. Overall, still one of my favorite lines. If you guys haven't gone down this line, be sure to do it. It's a lot of fun. You will enjoy it, especially if you're a DD player. And anyways, guys, get out there, have some fun. Good luck in ranked if you're playing it. But that's it for me, guys. Chapter 1 is ended. Episode 4 is done. Pan-Asian DDs, 180 games to get Tier 10. And we finished the first road, guys. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys are enjoying the series. Remember, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.